Welcome everyone to the Department of Justice Coordinated Tribal Assistance Solicitation CTAS Purpose Area 2, 3, and 4 webinar with the Bureau of Justice Assistance. My name is Christina and I will be your moderator for today. As we begin our presentation today, it is my pleasure to introduce our presenters, Trish Thaxton, Julius Dupree, and Dara Schulman. Starting the webinar will be our first presenter, Trish. Go ahead, Trish.
Thank you, Christina. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are in the country. And thank you for joining us today. I'm going to start with BJA's mission, which is to provide leadership and services in grant administration and criminal justice policy development to support local, state, and tribal justice strategies to achieve safer communities. BJA supports programs and initiatives in the areas of law enforcement, justice information sharing, countering terrorism, managing offenders, combating drug crime and abuse, adjudication, advancing tribal justice, crime prevention, and protecting vulnerable populations and capacity building. BJA is responsible for 3 different purpose areas within CTAS. Those are Purpose Area 2, the Comprehensive Tribal Justice System Strategic Planning Program. That one, while BJA manages it, is a joint effort of BJA, the Office of Victims of Crime, the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, and the Community-Oriented Policing Services Office. Purpose Area 3 is our Tribal Justice Systems Program, and Purpose Area 4 is our Tribal Justice Systems Infrastructure Program. I think we're going to go to a polling question here for a moment.
Great, thank you, Trish. And can we go ahead and launch our first poll question? And the question is, has your tribe applied for BJA-specific funding through the Department of Justice Coordinated Tribal Assistance Solicitation in previous years? Our options are Purpose Area 2, Purpose Area 3, Purpose Area 4, no, I have not applied, or unsure. And as you can see, we have 29% indicated that they've applied for Purpose Area 2 in the past, 49% indicated they've applied for Purpose Area 3, 20% with Purpose Area 4, 12% have not applied in the past, and 29% were unsure. And we'll go ahead and we'll launch our second poll question. And that question is, which BJA purpose areas does your tribe plan to submit an application for in fiscal year 2021? Our options are Purpose Area 2, Purpose Area 3, Purpose Area 4, and unsure. And as you can see, we have 18% plan to submit for Purpose Area 2, 52% plan to submit for Purpose Area 3, 39% plan to submit for Purpose Area 4, and 18% are unsure. Thanks everyone for participating, and we'll turn it back over to Trish.
Thank you. CTAS Purpose Area 2 is our Comprehensive Tribal Justice Strategic Planning Program. This is a project that allows you to engage in a comprehensive justice system-wide planning process to look at your entire justice system as a whole with the goal of improving tribal justice, community wellness, and public safety. This planning process is designed to be looking at the big picture and to include all of the different departments that are a part of your justice system, and even those that, while they may not be a part of the justice system, they impact the functioning of your justice system. So your law enforcement, your courts, probation and parole, treatment services, tribal jails, juvenile justice, crime victims' rights, any departments that you work with on an ongoing basis within your tribal justice system would be important partners to have at the table in this process. Child protection might be another one that is an important player in this process. The uses for funding under Purpose Area 2 are personnel to manage the project. You want someone who is a member of the community, who's local and able to be involved in an ongoing day in and day out basis to be able to work with all of the different departments within the justice system. Also general office equipment and supplies, travel to and from BJA sponsored training events, and that generally is going to be your orientation at the beginning of your project, assuming that we are traveling again at that point. Otherwise, events may be delivered virtually if travel is still not safe. Printing and distribution of printed materials, your community outreach, and your data collection. This process, you'll work with a dedicated training and technical assistance provider that is provided at no cost to grantees, and they will work closely with grantees to walk through the planning process from the initial process of bringing together your multidisciplinary team of all of the different partners that are necessary, coming up with the vision for your community, and then the process of creating a data collection tool and collecting data, crunching those numbers to inform the strategic plan, and then actually creating a written plan that will ultimately be turned into DOJ and will help to guide the process of strengthening your justice system going forward. It's important to be aware that this should be a process that is driven from within the tribe as opposed to hiring an outsider to come in and do a strategic plan for you. Hiring someone that's going to come in and create a plan is not something that is allowable under this purpose area. This is supposed to be from the inside, so to speak. Another thing that is often requested that is unfortunately not allowable is incentives and food and beverage costs, and that's a DOJ requirement that we don't have the control to change. One of the value-added pieces to this strategic planning purpose area is after a tribe has received a purpose area 2 award, gone through this whole planning process, and submitted a strategic plan that has been approved, then they're eligible to request what we call priority consideration of their CTAS application for one future funding cycle. Because our different purpose areas and different offices have slightly different requirements about when you can or cannot apply for an award, you have the ability to request priority consideration once per purpose area, but it does not have to be in the same year. So you may complete your plan and have, purpose areas 1, 3, and 9 are all directly connected to your plan. That's the other caveat is when you come in and ask for priority consideration, it needs to be directly connected to what you have identified in your strategic plan. You might come in 2024 requesting purpose area 1, but you're still not eligible for a purpose area 9 because you have a current award. So you would just wait until the next time you are applying for purpose area 9 to request that priority. So you will have access to requesting priority for each purpose area that is directly related to your plan, and it can be in different years, but it is only once per purpose area. Purpose area 3, our Tribal Justice Systems program, is our very, very broad purpose area where you can request just about any area of your justice system. We do focus on the adult justice system in BJA, but this purpose area can be used to fund programs that are designed to address alcohol and substance abuse, as well as to prevent crime, including substance abuse related crime, to enhance the justice system in your courts, healing to wellness courts, diversion programs, probation services, alternative dispute resolution, really just about anything, reentry, any aspect of the justice system can be funded through Purpose Area 3. We do, as I said, have a priority focus on the adult justice systems. However, if you're looking at a program that sort of straddles the continuum and includes youth and young adults, that absolutely would still be eligible. And we don't necessarily prohibit juvenile focused programs, but they're less likely to be funded than those projects that are including the adult justice system as well. And your programs, really can run the gamut. And if you have questions on something that you're wondering if it's allowable, go ahead and ask us. These are just some examples of programs that you might apply for under Purpose Area 3. It is by no means exhaustive, but you can look at tribal courts, planning or enhancing an existing court, alternative justice courts, including peacemaking courts or healing to wellness courts, veterans treatment courts, sentencing circles, and other traditional or alternative justice courts. Diversions and alternatives to incarceration, including law enforcement diversion, community supervision, mental health services, drug abuse treatment, electronic alcohol and offender monitoring, job training and placement, housing assistance, education, family, peer, and community supports, and prevention to protect the community from crime related to alcohol and drug abuse and production, including opioids, methamphetamine, prescription drugs, supporting culturally relevant and appropriate evidence-based substance abuse prevention programs. Treatment services, and you'll see we've mentioned multiple times in here culturally relevant and appropriate. We absolutely do support and encourage including your culture in your applications and in your program development. Corrections, develop and implement and enhance programming for tribal members incarcerated in tribal, federal, state, or local correctional facilities or under community supervision to reduce their risks for reoffending and support successful rehabilitation. Reentry, develop, implement, and enhance culturally appropriate reentry programs for individuals reentering communities. Law enforcement, supporting programming to improve officer safety, improve the delivery of law enforcement services in the tribal community. And I would say that for law enforcement requests, it's ideal to focus on those requests that would not be a good fit for the COPS Purpose Area 1 funding. For community-oriented policing and projects that directly fit the Purpose Area 1, you're going to be better off requesting it there. And the other thing I would mention here, if you're looking at requesting a vehicle through Purpose Area 3, know that we really are very limited in how often we will fund the purchase of vehicles. And when we do, it's generally when it is a small portion of an overall project and is clearly integral to the ability of the tribe to be able to successfully implement that program. For example, where you may have a substance abuse treatment program that is serving a community that's spread out enough and has a large percentage of your service population without vehicles, that you may need to help to provide transportation to specifically to treatment services or transportation. Another, one would be perhaps providing transportation directly to court. So things where it's clearly a very directly integrated into the program and where it would be very difficult to have that program be successful without a vehicle, and where there's not public transportation or other opportunities available to provide that support. So generally, I would not recommend including vehicles in these applications unless it's those sorts of specific circumstances. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Julius Dupree.
Well, thank you, Trish. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julius Dupree with Bureau of Justice Assistance. And I guess I'd like to just, before I get started, just to kind of make it clear that CTAS Purpose Area 4 is actually complementary to Purpose Area 3, but the scope is totally different in that Purpose Area 3's focus is really on programming needs, but Purpose Area 4 focuses on physical infrastructure. So in other words, you can use our funding to renovate, expand existing facilities, or erect prefabricated or permanent modular buildings to serve as a single jurisdiction or regional tribal correctional facilities. You can do multi-purpose justice centers. You can do alternatives to incarceration type of programs. You can include transitional living facilities or halfway houses, as well as if you have any sort of domestic violence shelters or or any sort of domestic violence programs, advocacy programs that actually support populations that are subject to tribal jurisdiction, then this is the right funding source for you, because it is a way of enhancing your strengthening your justice system actually through enhancing your physical infrastructure needs. And we have found that many of our folks that have applied for this funding in the past, some have had renovations that could be fairly small, and some renovations can be on a larger scale. We've seen a lot of permanent modular facilities lately. That seems to be more of a trend, because I know we don't offer funds for new construction, just to be clear on that. But as far as if it's short of new construction, as far as life expectancy for a project, the permanent modular facilities have demonstrated that they can have a pretty long life cycle as well. So that's just something to consider. But we do not allow for any temporary modular facilities. When I say temporary, that would be maybe a FEMA trailer. Those the kind of trailers that get used during natural disasters. And the reason why we don't allow that is just because they don't last as long, and it would not be a good investment to put a lot of money into a facility like that, and then it possibly doesn't withstand the elements over time. But some of our funding uses include you can use our funds for to support any site preparation work, sewage, water, purchasing furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Also, if you want to add capacity for recidivism reduction programming, in other words, that's more of our term for jail-based counseling or treatment, or if you want to do vocational training, or if you want space for that, then this is a good project for that. Also, maybe in some way just kind of enhancing the facility service or the function capacity. Sometimes we have police departments that they've run out of space for evidence storage, and so they may want to have more space for that, or maybe you want to bring on some more detention officers, and you can use some office space for a detention officer or two. Also, we also provide capacity for infrastructure to support staff training, fitness, and wellness. As some of you may be aware that there's been some information out there that does show that when staff is not healthy or doesn't have doesn't engage in fitness, then that can affect work performance. So we really want to try to help with those kind of holistic needs as far as your justice system goes. And also, please be mindful that there must be a criminal justice nexus for a facility being either renovated, expanded, or erected. So in other words, there's got to be some sort of criminal justice piece to it. Like, if you're serving a population, then the majority of that population that you serve should either have some sort of involvement with the court or referral from the court, or they may have been arrested and encountered law enforcement that way. But there's got to be some sort of law enforcement nexus. And I know sometimes we hear around the juvenile issue. Well, we actually kind of use the same standard for juveniles as the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. So I think it's more of like, at-risk youth is actually permissible under this program. Now, if you want to do some social programming as part of a multi-justice center, that's fine. But again, it's, that's hopefully whatever you're doing is kind of ancillary services, for those folks that are involved in the justice system in some way. And I know a lot of folks like the one-stop shop deal where they kind of combine all their different services, so folks can kind of just go in and get all their services in one place. So that is permissible as well. So I want to go a little bit into program requirements. When a lot of times when you have these kind of infrastructure types of projects, there are some requirements that are very important to adhere to. So I just want to kind of go through some of them here, and if you have additional questions about them, we'll have time, maybe after the session to talk a little more about that. But I'll be happy to address any questions that you may have. But the first requirement here is that applicants must certify the extent of planning they completed and present all relevant documents related to the completed planning activities. And so basically what that means is, at one point, we used to actually have a planning grant that we used to provide for grant recipients under this program. So basically they could go through, they could go through a new planning of new institutions, if you will, type of training and receive, do their planning that way. So that was something that we considered as far as BJA is a planning effort. Also, NIC, they do, I'll stop using acronyms. National Institute of Corrections actually does what they used to do, I know, planning of new institutions training, where, folks could go through that and you can you can learn how to plan for a long-term justice system planning. And so that's also acceptable if you've been through that. But, you don't have to be through any sort of Department of Justice sanctioned planning. If you work with an advisory group and you all have done, assessment, and you may have contracted with somebody to do an assessment to determine that your facility needs renovated or expanded, or you need, or if you're finding that most of your population is mainly substance abuse and maybe nonviolent, and so you've done a plan, and then you've determined that we don't really need a jail, but what we do need is a counseling or treatment facility for those folks. And so if you could come to us and say, hey, look, we got information from the community, we did surveys, kind of like what Trish was discussing through the strategic planning process and Purpose Area 2, then that's the kind of level of planning that we would want to see that you all have done to basically conclude or justify the need for which you're applying for. Another requirement is all applicants receiving funding for renovation or expansion projects will be required to indicate whether or not their structure appears to be viable. And essentially what that means is, we want to, if you all are going to be using funds, federal funds, and then you may be chipping in some of your funds from the tribal level to actually complete a project, then it's going to make sense that your building is structurally sound before you either attach an expansion to it or you attempt to renovate it, because the last thing you want to do is to start working on a project and you find out that your 100-year-old building is just not going to be able to sustain over a long haul, and may not even be able to withstand the type of work that's going to be required to do the renovation. And so we require that that your building is structurally sound. And we actually have a training and technical assistance provider that will, as part of the, if you are successfully awarded, before you all would either be able to, get started on the project, we're going to have a training and technical assistance project or providers that are going to visit, or not maybe physically visit, obviously, because of where we are and, with the pandemic, but they're going to call you, they're going to talk with you, and then if there's if they determine based on the discussion with you and and then they may ask for photos of your building, and if a determination is made that there needs to be further review of whether or not your building is structurally sound, then our TA provider will be working with maybe working with someone in your community to help to see if we can get that structural integrity assessment done on that. Another thing I wanted to just throw out here is our real property standards. While that may not be applicable, at the time you're applying for a grant, we just want to put you on notice that, in accordance with our DOJ real property standards, we will continue to monitor facility usage even once the grant ends, probably for the use of the useful life of the facility. So what that could mean is, we may be reaching out to you once a year. We may have, there may be like a little form that we ask you to submit just to let us know that you're operating and kind of let us know what your operational capacity is. And that way we know where things are with that particular project. And again, it's really it's a standard that we have in place, and it's really more so something that's really department wide as far as construction projects are concerned. So that's really something I wanted to highlight as well. Authorization for real property use. So I know this may sound risible or laughable, but we just want to make sure that you're authorized to use whatever facility that you've identified on the reservation for renovation or expansion. We just want to ensure that your leadership, that your council is privy to your putting in an application and identifying the facility that needs to be renovated or expanded. And that can be a letter on the tribe's letterhead. It doesn't have to be not a resolution. You don't have to do that. But if that's your tribe's bylaws and that's what the requirement is, then a resolution is fine. We just really want to give you a way to document that, without having to go through a resolution if you don't have to, because I'm sure that could possibly pose a delay. And that's the last thing we want to do, is impose any delays on you all as you try to get your applications in. Another requirement is a National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA compliance. So basically, what that is if you have a project that you're going to be renovating or expanding, it's just going to be an assessment done as far as whether or not your project is going to have, any level of impact on the environment. But what's going to happen is we'll give you a form to fill out, and then you all would just submit that form to us, and we'll make the determination as to whether or not you can get a categorical exclusion, which means that, there's been an assessment that what you're doing, may not have a significant impact on the environment, so you're okay to proceed. Or it could be, you may have to go the route of an environmental assessment, which actually means that, okay, based on your project is concerned, that there could be some environmental impacts. So you'll need to do a full scale assessment to maybe determine, what those impacts are before we can allow folks to move forward with their project. And I will say this year, I think we've really worked to really we're trying to streamline this project as much as possible, because we do find that this can be a significant period of time or a portion of time in your project. So we really want to try to streamline it as much as possible. So this year, we're going to really have, you all are not going to have to spend money. Like let's say we do make a determination that you do need to do an environmental assessment. Those environmental assessments can cost upward from anywhere from $20,000 to $40,000. But fortunately, you all will not incur that cost if you are successful in receiving funding. We'll be working with you all to do that assessment. We have resources to do it. So don't worry about having to reach out to someone on your end to do that work. So just wanted to convey that. That is a little different. So for folks that have applied for funding in the past, that have received Purpose Area 4 funding, you might have had to foot the bill for that. But this year, hopefully in future years moving forward, you folks will not have to foot that bill. The next requirement here is, so we require project insurance, a proof of project insurance prior to releasing funds. That's just good practice. Last thing you want to do is have a facility that's almost halfway there, and then you get some sort of natural disaster, God forbid, and then your project gets blown away, and so that's really kind of a way ensure that, to protect your investment, protect BJA investment, and so that's kind of why we have that in place. Another requirement is so if there are, we do encourage you that when you do your budgets, please ensure that you are, building in any sort of contingency funds, or you're calculating for any adjustments. I can say that as a result of COVID, we've seen, I think about it maybe like a 20% inflation, just because of the increase in costs for materials like wood and stuff like that, like things that you normally wouldn't think would be affected. But it's just really important to build in, that cost adjustment for each year, as well as any sort of contingency, just in case there is any sort of cost needs for overruns. Because what will happen is if you do determine that you may be exceeding the cost, or you may incur cost overruns, please let us know that as soon as possible. Because if you're not able to identify that funding to complete the project, we want to make sure that you kind of put things on hold a little bit until you do have the resources in place to complete the funding and ultimately operationalize the program, a project. The other thing I wanted to mention here as far as requirements is for permanent modular facility construction minimum requirements. So what we found is that folks have different concepts, or not concepts, but different interpretations, kind of what a permanent modular facility is. So we really wanted to be really clear on what we're looking for there. So if you can actually go, you'll see in the solicitation, it'll direct you to a document on our website, on the Tribal Justice and Safety website. So if you go to all the miscellaneous documents section, like right where the solicitation is, you'll see the permanent modular facility construction minimum requirements. So please take a look at that, because that may, that's probably going to impact the cost of your project, because there are certain requirements that we really want to look at around, the foundation, being of a certain caliber and strength. So just kind of keep that in mind. Let me just pause for a little bit before we move on, and I want to just see if there are any questions here that maybe I can ask before we move on. Either Teresa, Rachel, or Teresa, Rachel.
Sure, Julius. For Purpose Area 4, what type of insurance is needed under Purpose Area 4? Is it liability? Are there others?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, liability definitely, but I don't know what, as far as others, like what that would entail. But I can actually get back to you all on that. I can find out what that's going to entail, because we have a training and technical assistance provider that really has a very has a lot of insight on this topic, and so I can get back to you on that, and I may be able to get back to them or to the inquirer by the end of this presentation. But because I'm going to go ahead and send an email to our technical assistance provider, but I'll make sure to get back to them.
Great, thank you, Julius. And another one for Purpose Area 4 is, can a tribe apply for 2 projects under Purpose Area 4, and can that be done under one application?
The answer to that is yes.
Great, thank you. And also for Purpose Area 4, if you received a Purpose Area 4 award in the past, can you still apply?
The answer to that is yes, that's correct, but I want to add a caveat, and we're going to touch on this a little later. So if you have applied for Purpose Area 4 in the past, that there's no, like I said, there's nothing that precludes you from applying, but please, be cognizant of the fact that we really try to, one of the things we try to do is achieve equitable distribution, and we've been doing this for years, and basically just, making sure that we, tribes that have never received funding from us before, and, if their application does well, they would probably get priority consideration over a tribe that's already received funding from us in the past. But that's like the only kind of caveat, if you will. And also, it's going to be performance-based. I mean, if we're seeing that you currently have funding under us and the project that you have is not really progressing like it, we would hope that it would be at this time, or not really, not really consistent with what the original timeline was, then that may have an impact on us awarding you a second or another project under Purpose Area 4 as well.
Excellent.
Any
Thank you,
other?
Julia.
Sure.
Looks like we have 2 more Purpose Area 4 questions that are specific for
Okay.
PA4. The first question is, are we allowed to add personal staff to the budget as a result of an expansion?
No, and that's a really good question, actually. So Purpose Area 4 is the only type of staff that can be funded out of Purpose Area 4 may be like a construction manager, like if you have maybe a construction manager or, someone like that, that's really a project coordinator, but no operational staff. We don't cover any operational costs like staffing. But, we want to ensure that if you do have, if there are staff that you're going to need for that project, then, one of the things we're going to want to see as part of your application is what is your plan for securing that staff, or, let us know whether or not that staffing is already in place. Because I think one of the things that concerns us sometimes is we do get projects and they have all, the greatest intentions, but sometimes they may not, once the project is completed, or they may not have the funds to fully operationalize that facility because they don't have the staffing. And so that's something I just wanted to highlight as well about that.
Thank you, Julius.
Sure.
The last question specific to Purpose Area 4, and for those who have the Purpose Area 2 and Purpose Area 3 questions, I believe that we're going to be taking those in just a few slides. But the other Purpose Area 4 question is, what is the maximum amount of an award for Purpose Area 4?
Okay, if you're applying for a single jurisdiction project, that's one jurisdiction. The maximum, it's 1.8 million, up to 1.8 million. And the reason why it's 1.8 is because we did a very thorough assessment on what the inflation costs may be at this point due to the current circumstances. And similarly with the regional. So if you have a regional project, that's 2 or more tribes, then it's going to be let me go back. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's 1.2 million for single jurisdiction, and then for regional, it's 4.8 million. And that's, again, let me repeat that because I know I said a couple different things there. Single jurisdiction tribe, up to 1.2 million. Regional, up to 4.8 million.
Great. Thank you, Julius. And our other questions here are relating to Purpose Area 2 and 3, and there have been a few others who have indicated too that they'd like to hear once there's additional information on the types of insurance.
Okay, that sounds good.
Hey,
well, let
Julius,
me go ahead and move through. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Julius, this is Dara, and I just wanted to emphasize or build on one of the points that you made, particularly about the cost overruns in the budget and the escalation in costs that we're seeing with COVID and just in general construction costs. One thing that you want to consider when you're developing your budget that you're going to be probably developing in the next month or so is realize, as you see in the solicitation, we don't anticipate making awards until September. You'll hear by October 1 whether or not you've received an award. So that's a good 6 months from now before you even, when you make your budget to when you even receive the award. plus the amount of time to get the project up and running, to complete the NEPA, even with the streamlined process. We're probably looking at least a year to or even 18 months before we get to a point where we can release your funds after NEPA. And then if there's a design process, that could be another few more months that are in there as well. So make sure when you're looking at your budget that you're actually considering the cost, probably at least, looking at the earliest cost, thinking for maybe next summer at the earliest, especially if it's just a minor renovation type of project. But think about the cost not today, but at least a year, maybe even close to 2 years from now, when you're trying to figure out the total cost for your project, to make sure you've calculated in all of the costs.
Thanks, Dara. Good point. Good point. So I'm going to go ahead and just move on here so we can get to the rest of the questions here. CTAS eligibility, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about that because I did talk a little bit about it, but as you can see here, federally recognized Indian tribal governments, and also that I mentioned there's no preclusion or there's no prohibition on previous CTAS awardees for Purpose Areas 3 and 4, but they should demonstrate that the goals are going to be complementary or supplemental to current or existing projects funded under these purpose areas. And also, please note if there's a very large balance on the previous award, a new award may be unlikely. So just kind of keep that in mind. Just another thing, a grant writing resource that it's free, it's online. If you go to the tribal grants, if you see the website there, I encourage you all to take a look at that. It will take you from from the beginning of solicitation, development, planning, all the way through. It's very detailed. Talks to you about kind of what stakeholders you should really be pulling together as part of the application process, and identifying who's going to be the point person to make sure that all the different pieces of the applications get coordinated. So I mean, these are things that we may think of as commonsensical, but I find sometimes it's good to have this kind of thing as like a check, just to make sure that you've comprehensively done everything you need to do in order to get your application developed. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Dara Shulman, who you just heard from earlier. Dara?
Sure, thanks, Julia. Many of you are aware, hopefully at this point in time, you're aware, even if you have currently have an award with DOJ or have looked at this solicitation as compared to previous years. Yes, this is a whole new process for submitting the applications this year than it was in previous years. Hopefully you've attended some of the other prior webinars, the overview or something like that, and you've heard this probably discussed multiple times, but just want to re-emphasize that this is now a two-step process for submitting your application. So the first is to go in and make sure you have an account with grants.gov. That's the federal-wide system for submitting applications, to find the solicitation. And there you're going to submit what the SF-424, the application basically cover sheet, and as well as the lobbying disclosures through there. Then what that's going to happen is once you submit that through grants.gov, you'll then be getting an email to go ahead and submit the rest of the application within our new grants management system, the Just Grants system. We no longer, if you've had any awards before, DMS is gone. There's no access to it whatsoever. You must go through Just Grants. We're all learning these processes. We're all learning these systems. We're not saying that they're perfect at this point in time. So please feel free to ask us questions. The reminder, because it's a two-step process, there are two deadlines. The grants.gov submission is March 16th at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Let me clarify, all these submission times are Eastern time, so I know a lot of you are not in our same time zone as we are here in DC, so pay attention to that as well. Just so you know, you'll get an email within 48 hours from grants.gov letting you know whether or not the forms that you submitted were complete, and it's being sent over to Just Grants. So I actually, while the deadline is March 16th, you might want to go a couple of days earlier to go ahead and submit the application in grants.gov, that basic information, just so in case you get an error message saying that something was missing, you're not going to miss the deadline, so you won't be able to, otherwise you may not be able to submit in Just Grants. So even though that you've got that March 16th deadline, maybe look a couple days, I think a couple days prior might be the weekend, but so hopefully maybe the week before. You actually can go ahead and submit that now even to do that. Once you get that approval, you'll be able to then set up your accounts and submit it in Just Grants. Again, an entirely new process. I'm going to put a plug in. I have every intention of participating in this. Same time tomorrow is going to be another one of the CTAS application webinars, and that's focused solely on submitting your application. So I highly recommend that you join that session if you can. Hopefully we'll be able to turn that around pretty quickly, the recording, so you'll have it as a reference. It's also, if you go to Justice Grants, I'll look it up the website, the Justice Grants website. I'll put it in the chat. There's also a link to all kinds of videos and stuff and trainings for submitting their application. It's not necessarily targeted towards CTAS. It does give you an overview. The CTAS, we all know, is a little bit different because you're doing the combined application. But there are some slides they had some webinars set up there, unfortunately, that are all full at this time, but you can view the slides, and hopefully at some point you can view that recording as well. But again, tomorrow's session, highly recommend that you attend it, or review the video once you get it completed. And then you see on this slide all the different help desk information, whether it's with grants.gov, with Just Grants, or just if you have programmatic requirements, contacting the CTAS response center or the tribal grants email at the bottom. So I'll put that link up in the chat box to give you direct to all the different trainings.
Thanks, Dara. Appreciate it. We're closing it out here. Thank you. This next slide, again, I'm just providing some resources for because I mean there's CTAS, but then there's also grant funding opportunities that are not CTAS or tribal specific, but tribes are eligible. So I do encourage you, if you want to find out what funding resources that are going to be offered by Department of Justice for our fiscal year 2021. Here's a link here. It's the Department of Justice Program Plan. So it'll give you all the solicitations that are either out now or that are projected to come out sometime soon. Resources for DOJ funding opportunities. I'm not going to, we've talked a lot about these already, but the one that I do want to highlight is the NIJ's crimesolutions.gov. I think that website's a really good resource if you want to look at some of the promising or evidence-based practices that are being done in the justice system. You can find a lot of information there regarding that. So I would recommend that. And the other sources we already kind of talked about, so I really won't go into too much depth about those. Sarah talked about the CTAS application series, but the Bureau of Justice Assistance actually has a grant application series, which for all of our grants that are that have been released or that are out right now, we have webinars for each of those, kind of like what we're doing right now for CTAS. Well, the BJA non-CTAS funding, you can find a list of webinars, transcripts, recordings if you go to that link there. This is a lot of our social media information. So for those of you who are savvy in that, here's all the information for Facebook, Twitter, etc. So please be sure to take a look at that. So I guess we're all ready for Q&A at this point.
Thanks, Julius. Thanks, Trish. Thanks, Dara. The first question is for Purpose Area 3. And that question is, can we apply to employ a full-time court staff or full-time court staff to include a judge, a prosecutor, a public defender, and a court security officer? So for Purpose Area 3, full-time court staff, judge, prosecutor, public defender, and court security officer.
Yes, those would all be allowable expenses. You obviously are going to be looking at making sure that you can cover all of that within the allowable limits of funding, but those are definitely all allowable uses of the funding.
Excellent. Thanks, Trish. And the next question is regarding the criminal justice nexus. And does that include juvenile delinquency or just adult courts?
Yes, that includes juvenile delinquency. But yeah, as I'm sure aware, there are different standards. So, when it comes to the adult population, the criminal justice nexus is considered someone who, may have been, arrested and maybe referred by law enforcement, or someone who may have been referred by the court. That's another way, but that's the adult. Now, if it's a youth, and if it's at-risk youth, and there's the at-risk types of crimes like truancy and stuff like that, I guess. I mean, so looking at juveniles, it's a slightly different standard. It's at-risk youth, and then that's a little different from the adult standard. So.
Thank you, Julius. And our next question is also regarding Purpose Area 3. And can someone include the possibility of having incarceration fees included for Purpose Area 3 for the life of the grant in their application? Now, they realize that it might not ever be used to incarcerate an individual. So can that be included, or should it be hard dollars that the tribe is certain they will use during the life of that grant?
I would definitely recommend sticking with things that you're certain will be used during the life cycle of the grant. And the reason for that is that you want to be able to expend all of the funds. So if you can, for those soft dollars, so to speak, that you don't know if that's going to be necessary, it would be ideal to be able to find a non-grant source for those costs in order to make sure that all of the grant funding you actually are able to use. It's not a prohibited expense necessarily, it just would be a better use of grant funds to be sure that you're going to be able to use it.
Thank you, Trish.
Mm-hmm.
And our next question is regarding Purpose Area 2. Our tribe is at the beginning of the process of developing a tribal justice system with a specific need to build a law enforcement department and tribal court system. Are we eligible for a grant and training and technical assistance under Purpose Area 2, or do we have to have an existing justice system department and activities already underway?
So you definitely would be eligible to apply for Purpose Area 2. I would just caution that, as I mentioned earlier, it's very important in looking at Purpose Area 2 that you're looking at a justice system-wide plan. So if you're just looking to plan for creating and implementing a court system or a law enforcement department or any specific section of the justice system, you are better to come to Purpose Area 3 and request strategic planning for that specific function. So we want to do strategic planning around developing a tribal court. That's better to do in Purpose Area 3 if you're really narrow. If you're looking at developing the breadth of your justice system, including multiple departments and how those departments work together and create that solid foundation so that from the start, your justice system works as a broad-based integrated system across the different disciplines, then Purpose Area 2 would be a great place to come. And yes, the training and technical assistance is included in that process. And the other thing I would say is if you decide that doing a specific area under Purpose Area 3 is where you want to start, Purpose Area 2, and actually all of our TTA, but specific to Purpose Area 2, we do have the ability for our TA providers to provide support to non-grantee tribes on request, even if you don't have a grant award, and that is still at no cost to the tribe. So we encourage you to reach out to our TA providers and or to us, and we can connect you with them to look for some support around the different topic areas that we do have TA for.
Thank you, Trish. And the next question is regarding Purpose Area 3. And can Purpose Area 3 be used for technology upgrades for the tribal court? For example, could software or computers or office equipment be included?
Yes, they absolutely can.
Thank you. And do we need a tribal resolution or authorization letter? The application indicates on page 43 it is only needed for tribal consortia and designees only.
That is correct, and that was a change this year that was a result of feedback that we have received from tribes over the last several years. We did eliminate that requirement in order to make it easier, because we do understand that that process of getting a resolution can be a very long, time-consuming process. That said, because there is only one application per tribe, you still need to be certain that your tribal government is aware of the intention to submit an application, and the tribal authorizing official, which is usually the president or chairperson or similar, does still need to be the authorized representative in the Just Grant system, but there's no longer a resolution required.
Thank you, Trish. And our next question looks to be about Purpose Area 4 and Purpose Area 3. And due to COVID, we have not been able to complete building under our previous CTAS grant. We're still working on getting the building done. Can we still apply under Purpose Area 3? And also, can we ask for additional personnel under Purpose Area 3?
To answer your question, the fact that you're working on a PA4 project that's not completed due to whatever the circumstances are, like around COVID, as I think that was what's mentioned, that does not preclude you from applying for a grant for under Purpose Area 3. So yeah, that's fine. There's no problem with that. And Trish, you can weigh in if you have any other thoughts on that.
No, absolutely.
Okay.
It was the additional personnel portion of the question that I wasn't quite certain
I see what you're saying. Right. I guess what they were going to apply for under Purpose Area 3 for personnel. So you may want to give some detail about what the personnel guidance is.
I guess if the question, whoever entered the question could just follow up a little bit with just a little more information on what the additional personnel question portion of the question meant, that would be very helpful. Personnel is certainly allowable under both Purpose Area 3 and 4, but we would have to have a better understanding of what that piece of the question meant.
Great, thank you, Trish and Julius. And I am following up to see if we can get additional detail for the additional personnel under Purpose Area 3. And another question is regarding Purpose Area 3. Can a court clerk and court security yearly salary be included in the budget application for Purpose Area 3?
Yes.
Thank you. And for Purpose Area 4, the proposal requests copies of assessments or plans, but some of the assessments are lengthy and more than 60 pages long. Should those be included in the application?
As an attachment. If you're referring to the planning documents for Purpose Area 4, those should be included as an attachment. That's not going to count against your page limit at all.
Thank you, Julius. And if we are applying for more than one purpose area, will the SF424 have the total amount of all CTAS requests, or will we need to submit one 424 for each individual purpose area?
So this one has been a little bit of a different animal this time around with the new application process, but in grants.gov, you will only enter a single SF424. It only has the capacity to handle one. That can be an estimate of what you think the overall amount is going to be. That number's not really going to matter, is the bottom line. That when you then move into the Just Grant system and are completing your full application, you will, in Just Grants, be able to complete a separate SF424 for each of the purpose areas you're applying for, and that's the one that we will refer to for the amount that you're requesting.
Thank you, Trish. And as a follow-up to the question that was talking about asking for additional personnel under Purpose Area 3. We did receive additional information, and they're in need of a contractor for conflict cases for public defender. Also, they need to hire an additional part-time prosecutor because their full-time prosecutor currently is overloaded.
Okay, so yes, those are definitely things that can be requested under Purpose Area 3, and having a Purpose Area 4 award that is delayed because of COVID would not impact the request for that personnel under Purpose Area 3.
Thank you, Trish. And our next question is for Purpose Area 4. It is required that an applicant also show that they've applied for BIA funds to help leverage the project, or is it required that an applicant also show that they've applied for BIA funds to help leverage a project? And if a tribe has a particular foundation or other funder in mind to help fund the project, how much detail is needed about that foundation? For example, is a name needed, an amount, timing of application to those foundations?
Right. Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think there's a couple of things, and I just kind of want to unpack it with there's two different things here. So as far as like BIA funding is concerned, we find that it's the BIA projects are generally detention related. So if you receive operational or funding from BIA, like maybe through a PL 638 contract, or if you have, BIA doing direct services, we would want to know that. Now, if whatever you're doing as far as this project and if it has any sort of BIA, involvement, we'll definitely want to know that. So just please make that clear in the solicitation. And if you're waiting for additional funds from BIA to help offset the costs for maybe whatever additional staffing needs that you're going to have as a result of erecting this or completing this project, then that should be clear as well. And I think there's a little more guidance in the solicitation about that. Please be aware that whatever funds that you include as part of your budget, like the budget detail worksheet, budget narrative, like all that is going to be subject to audit. If there was ever an audit, there may not ever be an audit, but who knows? But I just want to be clear on that. So you would have to account for all that. If you were to put that money in the budget for the foundation, then you would have to be accountable for that money. But if you just say your project narrative, part of your application, if you say that we're going to be working with X foundation to help with, some costs for the project, then that's fine. That's not going to be subjected to the audit. But if there was ever an audit, I should say. But I just want that. I want to put that out there because we love to see it when projects come in and they have some other resources that they're going to be leveraging. Like that's always good. That's always a plus for your application. Not required, but it looks good. If you put it in the budget, then that raises it to another level of possibly assessment if there's ever any sort of audit for your project. And Dara, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that as well. But,
Sure. Well, I actually want to clarify a little bit. It's not just subject to audit, but if you actually put non-federal funds anywhere in your budget, and this applies to when it's not required, and this applies to any of the purpose areas, honestly, you're actually going to have to report on that. It's going to be part of your FFR as the recipient share. So Julius is right. We don't necessarily need to see that in your budget. However, if, say you're requesting $1 million from us for Purpose Area 4 renovation project, but the project is really $1.5 million, we want to make sure that you have that additional $500,000 accounted for, before the project gets started. So if the project is not going to be successful without that additional funding, we're going to want to make sure that funding is going to be received and certified somehow. So if you're just now getting started on looking for applications for foundations or from other places where it's not going to happen, or you don't know for sure that you're going to receive the funding, it's better to develop a project of a smaller scope that fits within our grant funding, and then we can talk about, looking at potentially expanding the project. But we would need to be assured that you actually have the funding to complete the full project if it's above the grant amount. That's something that's sort of important. We've had grantees in the past say, well, we're applying for this, to do this whole big project, and you're just going to be one piece of it, but oh yeah, we never actually received the funding for the rest of the facility, so we never actually were able to get them up and going because they didn't have the money, and we didn't want them to get stuck with, an incomplete building, because if that happens, that's part of that whole real property, making sure you're using the facility for the intended purpose, that it's up and operational. But so if you do have other sources, and especially if there's sources that are guaranteed right now, please make sure you talk about this. We would love to see a total project budget as included as an attachment to the application, not specifically within the budget detail worksheet, but we would want to know for sure the total cost of the project, the scope of the project, and where these other funding sources are coming from.
Yeah, thanks, Dara. That's a good point.
Thank you both, Julius and Dara. Great information. We do have another question, and that is, if we successfully write for one purpose area, but our other purpose areas that we applied for were not successfully written, will the grant application be awarded for the one area that met all requirements for a successful application?
Assuming that it's selected for award, yes, but the purpose areas are independent, and the easiest way to kind of conceptualize that is that CTAS functions as an umbrella application to make it easier for any portions of the application, like the community and justice profile, so that you don't have to write that information multiple times for multiple grant applications. But each purpose area is a separate grant application for the purposes of review and award. None impacts whether or not another one will be awarded. You could receive one, you could receive multiple, and they're not going to, your success in one is not going to impact your success in another. And it's also important to know, we don't have a preference for whether you opt to apply for one purpose area or multiple purpose areas. We truly want you to be putting in an application for what the tribe needs, whatever that may be.
Thank you, Trish. And with applying, can you apply for both a CTAS Purpose Area 1 and a CTAS Purpose Area 3 grant?
Yes, you can. You can apply for, any or all purpose areas. The one that, now I would say, if you're looking to apply to both Purpose Area 3 and 1, or any two purpose areas, don't put the same application in for each of those. They should be separate, distinct requests that are not duplicative, but you absolutely can apply for as many purpose areas as you wish. The only caveat to that would be if you have previously received a Purpose Area 2 award, that is the only purpose area that is a one-time purpose area. So if you've received a Purpose Area 2 before, then you would not be eligible to receive another one. So don't spend time writing another one, but for every other purpose area, you can apply more than once.
Excellent. Thanks, Trish. And what is the maximum amount you can apply for under Purpose Area 3?
What we find sometimes with these construction or these renovation projects is that, folks may come in, they may be working on a multi-purpose justice center, but they may, due to the cost, they may phase it in. So like 1 year, we've seen someone use our funds for the law enforcement portion, and then another year when they get completed, then they come back in for the court piece of it. So I would encourage you that if you do have the luxury to be able to design your project so that you can fit other, units or something, or you can expand on it later, then that's probably the way to go. But that's just that's a way to get at your multi-purpose justice center. If you're doing that, you can kind of get at that, incrementally, if you will. phasing it in. Phasing it in is kind of the word we use. So sorry, go ahead, Trish.
Yeah, so we're looking at up to $900,000 for a 5-year grant period.
Excellent. Thanks, Trish. Thanks, Julius. And before there was a question about an assessment, and would it be acceptable to take an excerpt from an assessment in lieu of providing the full report? Because some information in the full assessment report is considered sensitive or privileged information. Is it okay to not include those pieces?
So with that assessment is concerned, like you don't even have to attach it if you're not comfortable attaching that information. But please, in your project narrative, mention that your planning project, our planning process entailed doing whatever assessment that you did, and just kind of briefly summarize the findings of the assessment, and that'll be fine. If we ever had any questions about the assessment, we would ask for it later down the line, but that's not necessary to have that in there. Just talk about it in your narrative.
Another option would be is if the assessment has like an executive summary. If you wanted to just attach that so that we have at least an idea of what was done, that would be great. Hopefully I would hope an executive summary wouldn't have confidential information, but if it does, we don't want you providing stuff that shouldn't be shared publicly.
Good point. Yeah, executive summary would be great.
Thanks, Julius. Thanks, Dara. And it was mentioned that some steps for more than one purpose area can be combined. Is it clear in the application what those areas are?
Yes. So there are certain pieces such as the tribal community and justice profile, and that's really the primary one that you only write one time, and that is then included with each of the purpose area applications. And that's your general background picture on the tribe, talking about the tribe, their resources, their needs, and so forth. It gives the overview of your tribal community, and that is only written once, and then it is shared among all of the purpose areas. And then the purpose area narratives are specific to each purpose area.
Excellent. Thank you, Trish. And for Purpose Area 3, the performance period for Purpose Area 3 is 5 years. Does an applicant have to propose a project for the full 5 years?
No, they do not. I will say, as long as your application very clearly shows the number of years that you're requesting and your budget, matches that, you're absolutely fine. We may choose to make an award with a 5-year period just so that you don't have to worry about no cost extensions, but you can definitely define the grant period that is appropriate for you, and we're not going to change your budget if you find an award comes through with a longer grant period attached to it. It would still be for the number of years that you requested.
Thank you, Trish. And there was just a follow-up to see if there was any additional information found on the types of insurance required for Purpose Area 4 grants.
I'm still waiting to hear back on that. So is there any way that I can get this information to you as soon as I hear back, Rachel or Christina?
Sure. Once, if we hear back after the webinar, we can also make sure to get that information out to those who asked that question.
Great.
And if we hear beforehand, of course, we can add that information back in as we go through the Q&A.
Right.
Just as a reminder, there are some CTAS application resources, and on this slide we do have the contact information for just grants and grants.gov, the response center, and the CTAS solicitation website, as well as the link for the preparing for a CTAS solicitation. It's the online tool. And just as a reminder, the grants.gov application deadline is Tuesday, March 16th, and that's at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And the Just Grants application deadline is Tuesday, March 30th, and that's at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And we do have a follow-up question, and that is to clarify regarding Purpose Area 4, the comment regarding phasing in costs. Does that mean a project would complete a build-in-one application, then the applicant could submit a new application for the next part of the build? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. But, you know, we wanted to make sure that the project was complete for that first phase, meaning that it's, you know, operationalized. You know, you have folks, you have staff working there, you're providing services or whatever the services may be. And yeah, you could come in for a subsequent application to build onto that.
Excellent. Thank you, Julius.
Mm-hmm.
Julius, Trish, Dara, do you have any additional tips or information that you would like to share with our attendees?
The only thing I would like to add is to know that all three of us are always willing to answer questions by email. So please don't hesitate if you have questions that come up as you're going through this process to send either any one of us or all three of us an email, and we will make sure that we get you the answers that you need.
Excellent. Thank you, Trish. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. Thank you, Julius, Trish, and Dara, for the great information. We would like to thank everyone for joining. Thanks, everyone, for joining, and I hope you have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.